The invitation had been a surprise. My daughter-in-law Stephanie rarely included me in family outings, especially not dinner at Meridian, the upscale restaurant downtown that had been making waves in the food scene for the past 2 years. It's Derek's promotion celebration, she'd explained over the phone, her voice carrying that familiar tone of forced politeness. We thought it would be nice to have the whole family together. I should have known there was a catch. Now I sat at the elegantly appointed table, watching Stephanie hold court with Derek's colleagues from his law firm. She was in her element, beautiful, charming, and completely in control of the conversation. At 34, she had the kind of confidence that came from never having been truly challenged by life. "The wine list here is incredible," announced James, Derek's senior partner. "I've heard they have bottles that cost more than most people's car payments." Stephanie's eyes lit up with opportunity. "You know what? We should splurge tonight. Derek's promotion deserves a really special bottle." She signaled the sommelier with the practiced ease of someone who'd grown up with money, though I knew for a fact her family had been solidly middle class. Stephanie had simply mastered the art of appearing wealthy. "What would you recommend for a celebration?" she asked the wine expert, a young man named Marcus who clearly recognized quality when he saw it. "For a special occasion, might I suggest the 2015 Chateau Margaux? It's exceptional, though it is one of our premium selections." "How premium?" Stephanie asked, though I could tell she'd already decided. $800. The table fell silent. Even for successful lawyers, that was a significant amount for a single bottle of wine. "Perfect," Stephanie said without hesitation. "We'll take it." Derek looked uncomfortable. "Steph, maybe we should." "Don't worry about it," she interrupted, then turned to the sommelier with a brilliant smile. "The old woman will pay." She gestured toward me with casual dismissiveness, as if I were a pose she'd brought along to cover expenses. The entire table erupted in laughter. Derek's colleagues, their wives, even Derek himself chuckled nervously. They all thought it was hilarious that this young, beautiful woman was sticking her elderly mother-in-law with an $800 wine bill. "Stephanie, that's not," I started to object. "Oh, come on, Margaret," she said, waving off my concern. "You're always telling us how we should enjoy life more. Besides, you can afford it. Derek told me about your little nest egg." "My little nest egg." If only she knew. I watched the sommelier's face carefully as Stephanie continued her performance. Marcus looked deeply uncomfortable with the entire exchange, glancing between Stephanie and me with obvious concern. He said gently, addressing me directly, "Would you like to see the wine list before?" "That won't be necessary," I said quietly, reaching into my purse. "I'll take care of the bottle." More laughter around the table. Stephanie beamed with satisfaction, clearly delighted that her plan was working so smoothly. I pulled out my Black American Express Centurion card and handed it to Marcus. "Please charge the entire evening to this card." The laughter died abruptly as everyone got a good look at the distinctive black metal card. Derek's colleagues, successful lawyers who made good money, recognized it immediately. The Centurion card wasn't something you applied for. It was invitation only, requiring both significant wealth and spending. "Mom," Derek said quietly, his voice full of confusion. "Where did you get that card?" "The same place I've had it for the past 15 years, dear." Stephanie was still smiling, but I could see uncertainty creeping into her expression. "What's the big deal?" "It's just a credit card." "It's not just a credit card," James explained, his voice filled with new respect as he looked at me. "That's a Centurion card. You need to spend at least $500,000 a year to even qualify." The color began draining from Stephanie's face. Marcus returned with the card and a knowing smile. "Ms. Patterson, it's an honor to have you dining with us this evening. I'll make sure you receive our finest service." "Ms. Patterson." Stephanie repeated. "Your name is Margaret Morrison." "Actually," I said calmly, "my name is Margaret Patterson Morrison. Morrison was my married name. Patterson is my maiden name, and my business name." Recognition dawned slowly across the faces of Derek's law colleagues. Patterson Holdings was one of the largest real estate investment companies in the state, with a portfolio that included everything from office buildings to shopping centers. "You're Margaret Patterson," James breathed. "From Patterson Holdings." "That's correct." Stephanie's mouth opened and closed like a fish. But you live in that little house. You drive an old car. You shop at discount stores. I live simply because I choose to. I built my company by understanding the value of money, not by spending it on status symbols. The table had gone completely silent. Derek looked like he was seeing me for the first time, while his colleagues regarded me with the mix of awe and respect usually reserved for celebrities. I don't understand, Stephanie said weakly. Derek said you were on a fixed income. He said you needed help with expenses. I looked at my son with disappointment. Derek, when did I ever tell you I needed financial help? Derek shifted uncomfortably. You didn't. I just assumed, after Dad died, and you downsized the house. I downsized because I didn't need a 5-bedroom house for one person. I invested the proceeds, like I've been investing money for the past 40 years. Marcus approached the table again, this time with obvious deference. Ms. Patterson, Chef Williams would like to know if you'd prefer your usual table? The one with the view of the kitchen. My usual table. Stephanie echoed faintly. Ms. Patterson dines with us frequently, Marcus explained. She's one of our most valued guests. What he didn't mention, and what Stephanie was about to learn, was that I was much more than a valued guest. Actually, Marcus, could you ask Chef Williams to come out? I'd like to introduce him to my family. Chef Williams appeared moments later, a tall man in his 50s with the confident bearing of someone at the top of his profession. Margaret. I didn't realize you were here tonight. How are you? I'm well, Thomas. I'd like you to meet my son Derek and his wife Stephanie. Thomas shook hands warmly with Derek, then turned to Stephanie with polite professionalism. Any family of Margaret's is family of ours. Chef Williams, I said casually, didn't you mention last week that you needed to make some changes to the kitchen staff? Yes, unfortunately. We had to let someone go yesterday. Chronic tardiness, attitude problems with customers. I hated to do it, but we can't maintain our standards with that kind of behavior. Stephanie had gone completely pale. Who did you fire? Brandon Miller, Thomas replied. Nice enough kid, but just not a good fit for our establishment. Stephanie's brother. The job I'd helped him get 6 months ago when Stephanie complained about his unemployment. Brandon Miller is my brother, Stephanie whispered. Thomas looked surprised, then apologetic. I'm sorry. I didn't realize the connection. But the decision was final. We can't have staff members who don't respect our customers or our standards. The pieces were finally falling into place for everyone at the table. I owned the restaurant. I'd gotten Brandon his job. And now he'd been fired for the same kind of behavior his sister was displaying tonight. I don't understand, Stephanie said, her voice barely audible. How do you own this restaurant? How do you have that card? Why didn't Derek know? Derek didn't know because Derek never asked. He made assumptions about my life, just like you did. As for the restaurant, it's part of my portfolio. I invested in Thomas's vision 2 years ago when he was looking for backing to open Meridian. I turned to address the table. I've built Patterson Holdings over 4 decades. We own commercial real estate, invest in promising businesses, and provide capital for entrepreneurs with good ideas. Thomas needed an investor who understood both food service and real estate. It was a natural partnership. Derek found his voice. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me about your business? You never seemed interested. When your father was alive, you used to ask about our work. After he died, you and Stephanie started treating me like a helpless widow who needed to be managed rather than the person who built a multi-million-dollar company. The $800 bottle of wine arrived, but nobody seemed interested in celebrating anymore. Stephanie stared at the bottle like it was evidence of her own stupidity. I want to apologize, Derek said quietly. I've been a terrible son. I let Stephanie convince me you were struggling financially, and I never bothered to verify it with you directly. Derek, Stephanie hissed, don't apologize. She tricked us. She didn't trick anyone, James interjected. Your mother-in-law is one of the most successful businesswomen in the state. You just never bothered to find out who she really was. I sipped the expensive wine, it really was exceptional, and watched Stephanie process the destruction of her worldview. For 2 years, she treated me like a burden, an elderly woman to be managed and manipulated. She'd convinced Derek that I was financially dependent, probably hoping to position herself as my eventual caretaker and beneficiary. The old woman will pay, I repeated her words back to her. You were right about that, Stephanie. I will pay. I always do. I signaled Marcus over. Please prepare the check for the entire evening. And Marcus? Include a 20% gratuity for yourself and the kitchen staff. That's very generous, Ms. Patterson. Good service deserves good compensation. Something I wish more people understood. Stephanie made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Margaret, I'm sorry if I seemed presumptuous. I was just trying to make Derek's celebration special. By publicly humiliating me and assuming I couldn't afford to pay for my own dinner. I didn't mean it that way. How did you mean it, exactly? Stephanie couldn't answer because we both knew exactly how she'd meant it. She'd wanted to establish her dominance, to show Derek's colleagues that she was the important one while I was just the elderly relative to be tolerated. The evening concluded with strained politeness. Derek's colleagues went out of their way to speak with me, clearly recalibrating their understanding of the family dynamics. Several handed me business cards, mentioning potential investments or partnerships. As we prepared to leave, Thomas approached our table again. Margaret, I wanted to let you know that we're planning a special event next month, a collaboration with 3 James Beard winners. I'd love to have you as our guest of honor. I'd be delighted, Thomas. Please send the details to my office. In the parking lot, Derek walked me to my car, my old car that happened to be a meticulously maintained classic Mercedes that was worth more than most people's houses. Mom, I owe you a huge apology. And I owe you an explanation for how things got so messed up. Derek, I love you. But you're 42 years old. You chose to marry someone who treats your mother like an ATM machine. You chose to believe assumptions instead of asking questions. Those were your choices. What can I do to fix this? Start by being honest with yourself about who your wife really is. Tonight wasn't an aberration, Derek. This is who Stephanie is when she thinks she has power over someone. I drove home to my little house, a modest 3-bedroom craftsman that I'd bought after selling the family estate. What Derek didn't know was that the house sat on 5 acres of prime real estate that I was holding for development. What he also didn't know was that the entire property was worth more than his law firm's annual revenue. 2 weeks later, Derek called to tell me he was filing for divorce. Apparently, Stephanie's reaction to learning about my wealth had been to demand that Derek force me to give her money and properties as compensation for the years of disrespect she'd endured. She actually said I should sue you for intentionally deceiving her about your financial status, Derek explained. She thinks you owe her something for not knowing you were rich. Brandon never got another job in the restaurant industry. Word travels fast in that community. Stephanie moved back in with her parents and started a blog about toxic in-laws that nobody read. As for me, I continued running Patterson Holdings, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and having dinner at Meridian whenever I wanted exceptional food and wine. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being exactly who you've always been, while letting other people reveal who they really are. The $800 bottle of wine was worth every penny.